everybody is, and then we can see how we deal with that. Is that all right with everybody?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah. Cisco, you had the floor. You're next.
Okay, great. Thanks, and good seeing everybody. I'm Cisco Werner. I'm the Chief Science Advisor for the NOAA Fisheries Service. I'm based in Washington, D.C., and like Peter and others here, I'll be co-leading one of the sessions. I'll be co-leading the session that covers the Americas and part of the Pacific. I'll be doing that in particular with Marino Wickman, who's also on the call here. So it's good to see everybody.
So maybe Marino could go next.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm beaming in from Noumea, New Caledonia. It's about 6 a.m. my time, so it's good to see everybody. I'm actually employed by the Cook Island government as the data manager for the Ministry of Marine Resources, but currently based in Noumea with the Pacific Community, which is an intergovernmental organization which services 18 of its member states, and we provide a lot of the technical and scientific services for our members. So very much looking forward to the next few sessions over the next week or so, and as Francisco mentioned, I'll be co-leading with him for the Fisheries Working Group. Thank you.
Yeah, let's see. I guess the order looks different to each of us, so maybe I should guide you. Greg Hinks, you want to go next?
Hi, I'm from the United States, New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. I'm a fisheries biologist with the state's Bureau of Marine Fisheries. I supervise our fishery independent monitoring programs, and I oversee our offshore coastal bottom trawl survey.
And Christian, perhaps?
Hello, my name is Christian Muñoz. I'm working in the Institute of Marine Research in Norway. I'm part of the steering group of the Ocean Best Practices System and currently working in the EF Nansen project dealing with science that's also capacity development around Africa and Indian Ocean.
And then we have Sven Kupschus here.
Hi. I'm Sven. I am currently chair of the Ecosystem Observation Steering Group for ICES. So I deal with a lot of the work that supplies the data to or provides the data to the advisory processes, predominantly in fisheries, but theoretically at least on other ecosystem components as well. So I've been involved in some of this best practice thing. Generally, I have a little bit of an unease about best practice because best practice is good to keep things consistent, but it does have a tendency, or at least a risk, hampering progress. So it's a kind of a balance that we need to hit. So I'll be interested to see where this workshop goes. I'm certainly new to defining best practice and those kinds of things. So I look forward to it.
Thank you, and thanks for joining and contributing in the follow-up. And then Nikos.
I'm Nikos Nikoliudakis. I am also working at the Institute of Marine Research here in Norway. I'm also involved in the ecosystem approach to fisheries Nansen program of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, which provides advice and capacity development in countries around Africa and the Indian Ocean, and in the past has been almost all around the world. And we also collect a multitude of data, mainly fisheries related, but anything that a research vessel can actually collect. So we are having quite some experience with and challenges of finding the best practices to work with all of these kinds of data.
Thank you. And I should say maybe myself, I don't have a very long and distinguished fisheries career behind me. I have worked broadly within oceanography and also been involved from the IOC, Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, in setting up and defining this decade. But I'm quite interested to see how this thing developed, and I have not taken part in any of these ocean best practices workshops earlier. So I thought it was quite interesting to see how we can, to what extent we can make something out of this for fisheries, which is my main interest now. I guess we haven't really made a detailed plan for how we're going to use the next few minutes or this particular breakout. I think we would adapt it to who would show up and so forth. But as many of you know, we have prepared a plan for the sessions, and there's a document available in the folder, and I don't know how much each of you have been able to navigate around these. I'm a novice to these technologies, but I'm trying to learn, and we're trying to figure out how to develop this initiative and documents during the session and so forth between the sessions. So I guess most of you are familiar with the plan for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, where we start with data collection, go on to assessment, and then management and advice, and wind up. And there's this little write-up document we owe a lot of Cisco for, but we have looked at it, the rest of us as well, and we have this plan for how to address these issues. I see that my internet connection is unstable partly here, so if I drop out, please take over. I don't know if any of you have, I mean, we have this set time schedule, and we have the one document that we have prepared, and we have planned and invited speakers to start off the discussion in these various sessions, and Sven is one of them. But then we are really keen to discuss the various issues that we should be discussing, whether this process can be important or useful to the community. And I hope that we will be able to get a little bit more specific and concrete than the former session we just listened to. It was really broad and covering very much the background. I really hope we can go down to the more details. What are the challenges? What are the gaps? What are the success stories? We were asked to talk about that. What are the steps forward, and how can this system, ocean best practices, be used to help the fisheries community? So there are other questions too, but those are kind of some of the overarching that we're asked to report back to at the end of next week. So I think maybe I shouldn't talk all the time. I'll throw it over to Cisco first and hear what you think about how we should proceed with this.
Sorry, Peter, before you do, could you just show us where the document you referred to is?
I'm not sure I can show you, but I can try to explain. There is a folder called Fisheries Participants, and let me see if I can. If you are on Yeah. If you're able to navigate to this page,
Sorry, Christian speaking. Can you see the screen shared right now?
yeah. Yes, we can.
All right. Well, here in the main page of the fisheries session, there is this welcome document on the right side. So right a bit down here in the key links for this working group, you will find two main links. One drives us straight to the folder where we have all the information. And the other link is straight going to the working group report template, where we will find all the different questions that we need to respond by the end of the workshop. And also here in this folder breakouts, we will be storing all the minutes and notes from every day, divided by groups. Group one will be the group that will be holding the sessions in the morning in Central European time, and group two will be the one running the session in the other side of the world. Also, you will find in the main folder this Fisheries Community Consultation Working Group, OBPS, where you will find a detailed agenda of what is going to happen next week. But also you, in the main document, in the main welcome document, you will also find all the same detailed agenda in the same document, as you can see here. And also important here in this other tab, you have the calendar of all the sessions of the workshop. It is important that you know that you can change also the time. You should be able to change also the time frame and change it according to your own time zones. So all these times would adapt to your time zone as well. And pretty much that's all.
Yeah, so maybe I can jump in, and I think that maybe addressing part of Sven's questions and others. This is a new format for many of us. Like Peter said, there's a lot of different platforms, links and folders and such. And now that we have a final list of registrants, right? Because I think that they extended the registration a little bit to make sure that everybody who had forgotten to sign in actually does so. Maybe over the weekend, or certainly by sometime Monday, if we could strive to send out some of the key links again to the people who now have been identified as registered for the fisheries section, and try to make it easier for people to know where to go and what to look for, because I think we're all juggling multiple things, work as well as the meeting at the same time, and it's hard to keep track of all the things that have come in. So this is open for all of us for discussion here, but maybe having a one page or 2 page cheat sheet, if you want to call it that, of where the key documents are and such, as something, as well as the overall arching goals of the fisheries group, is something that we can try to send out. Again, we now have a final list, and so now we know who to send it to, which we didn't have until earlier this week. So Sven, I think you probably raised a question that we all have: exactly where is everything? And now I think we can finally do that. It's everything is a little bit sort of on the fly in real time. I think we're finally there.
I guess there is a new person that entered to the session. I'm not sure if you
Oh, yes.
would like to introduce yourself or.
What is the name of the person? It may be me, but I don't know if I'm new or not.
BP Santos.
That's me. I guess I'm new. Yeah, I wasn't quite sure whether I registered for the session or not, but I'm certainly interested in it. Yeah, my name's Vardis Santos. I'm based at the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory. You're probably thinking, what is the connection with fisheries? Well, I used to be a fisheries ecologist and scientist, but now I work more in the area of remote sensing. And so I'm very interested in the connection and the usage of environmental information from satellites and also models to inform both fisheries oceanography research, but also potentially more ecosystem-based approaches for fisheries management. So I'm actually involved and lead a project called Coverage that tries to develop some informatics tools to enable integration of environmental and different types of in situ data sets, including animal telemetry data and ecological survey type data sets, and integrating those with remote sensing data. So I'm just kind of a little bit maybe on the periphery here, but I'm interested in the connection between fisheries and environmental information and spatial dynamics. So hopefully, there'll be some good discussion on that dimension as well.
So this is Cisco, and I think you joined after some of us introduced ourselves. So I'm
Sure.
I'm with NOAA Fisheries.
Okay, nice.
I'm the chief science advisor. I'm based in DC, and funny you should say that the satellite aspect is something, how to link that to fisheries. I just want to say that maybe it was 2 weeks ago, we had a discussion within our line office about how to work with our colleagues at NESDIS, which is the line office in NOAA that deals with all of the satellite aspects.
Right.
I'll just say something real quick. I think the satellite, the working with the remote sensing aspects, like you said, is extremely important, particularly in getting a broader view of what's going on, basin scale. In some ways, on the other hand, we're also interested in details in coastal areas, whether it's red tides that can affect some of our fisheries quite significantly, whether it's the formation of fronts that help aggregate some of the species and cause problems in bycatch fishery. Where swordfish like to be is also where turtles like to be, and we're not allowed to catch turtles and things like that. And it's also something that helps us understand fleet dynamics. Particularly now, boats, ships now have to have these instruments where you can tell where they are, and understanding fleet dynamics is actually something that we might be able to use to estimate catch per unit effort, or at least can be a factor in that. So I think this will be a great contribution. And I'm sorry, is your first name again? Sorry.
Vardis, Vardis.
Okay, great. Thanks for
yeah. So, yeah, perfect. This sounds really topical. This coverage project that I mentioned also integrates AIS data from Global Fishing Watch. So we are bringing in these different types of data layers into a common kind of frame to help fishery scientists and the like explore interactions or interrelationships between data.
Boy, we're already getting into our session here. This is a wonderful discussion, and
excellent.
I'd be curious to see what Sven has to say. I'm not sure if he can go along, because Sven just led a long workshop on how do you do with reduced numbers of days at sea. What happens if you lose the capability of having seagoing vessels, but satellite might make up part of it. I don't know, Sven, if that's something you considered.
Well, first of all, hi Vardis. There's
Hey.
another connection. I worked for 4 years in Melbourne, Florida, for the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission,
Okay,
and we
great.
used to sample the area around NASA, the wildlife refuge,
Okay.
in the closed area.
Right.
So I've watched some, well, then shuttle starts and the likes from far too close a distance, too close for comfort in one case.
Okay. Yeah.
So there's
Oops.
other connections there, but I think we are having to integrate. But the point is that we need to actually make sure that we use the data and the resources effectively,
Right.
to maximize the benefits, and
Absolutely.
lack control over a lot of these things. And somebody already said it in the open session about, ground truthing and quality assurance and the likes. And I think that's where the research vessel is really going to be the tool of choice. It gives us the most flexibility, but so in tying these things together, and I think that's where really the challenges for the future are, how to tie these different data streams with very different qualities and characteristics
Exactly.
together in a coherent way. I mean, with satellite data, maybe it's less of an issue, but the assumption that we are sampling for these, data sets of opportunity randomly with respect to the resource, I don't, those are the issues. And if you just chuck it into an AI and get an answer out, if you've got biased data in there, it won't tell you. And so those are the kind of challenges that I see. In terms of defining that as best practice, it really depends on the question, and we are far behind where we as fisheries scientists ought to be, and talk to policy and the likes, to actually define the question with regards to the socioeconomic desires and the societal will, in order for us to build a monitoring program for it. We keep talking about stock assessments and fisheries advice, and that's all based on single species. So until we get a different answer, I'm not sure how much progress we're making. I mean, Seattle is making a lot of progress, or trying to make a lot of progress in it, but as soon as you push them, they do it on the science side, but as soon as you push them on the advice side, everything just drops back. Say, oh, no, we can't upset the single species. So I think those are kind of my observations of the process. And I think we have to be careful to make sufficient, make sufficient of the opportunities that we see going forward, in terms of writing our best practice without setting an agenda that's either unattainable or too specific.
Yeah, good point.
I think I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah, I guess just one comment, in terms of, you mentioned as well, the integration of these data sets. One area that I actually actively work in these days, wearing sort of more of a data management kind of hat, issues of data interoperability between, and data standards applicable to different kinds of earth science data, both remote sensing and in situ. So I don't know if that is a topic of conversation as well, within this session. But, in dealing with fisheries data, obviously, attempts to harmonize data that's being publicly distributed for the purpose of trying to integrate it with multivariate environmental information, that could be maybe an interesting topic of discussion as well. I think it's much needed. So I've done some work specifically in the animal telemetry kind of side of things, but I'm also interested in approaches to development of data standards for ecological survey type data sets as well. So
if I may chip in quickly on
sure.
that, I think the fact that we are doing this fisheries session as part of a wider ocean best practices is a good segue into that. How can we develop these areas in the future in a good way, and
Absolutely.
if to the extent that we are not completing that issue during our sessions, I think the fact that we are in this wider context is points to ways to deal with this in the future. And we talk also about availability of data and proprietary data and so forth, and different sources.
Right.
So how to get to that?
Yeah, I mean, there is this concept of the FAIR principles for data: findable, accessible, interoperable, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know to what extent that may apply to fisheries data, or obviously there's proprietary aspects to many of these kinds of data sets. But I think those are some general organizational principles that would be good to see practiced as well in the fisheries area as well, in terms of data.
I think certainly in ICES, the International Council for the Exploration of the Seas, which is kind of it's not an RFMO, but it's a
Sure.
kind of a scientific advisory body within Europe, and they advise the ministers on fisheries predominantly, but also now starting on other ecosystem aspects and so forth. We have a very developed policy on the quality assurance and the public availability and so forth. It hasn't really helped people. All our survey data and so forth is available on the internet. And we spend half the time trying to explain to people, no, you can't use it like that. It wasn't collected
exactly.
like that.
Right.
And then, so there are limitations to that approach. Certainly
Sure,
the EU has been very keen to provide, with all the funding that they provide, there is always you must make this data publicly available. And actually the GUs, as they call them, are the sort of keepers of a lot of this data on databases. And it's so easy to download data, but when you don't know all the data sources that make it up, I mean, we've had people use ferry box data, which I don't know what but it's strongly spatially autocorrelated, because it's just where the ship is, and you get 1,000 measurements. And they're all at one time, and then you calculate an average of that. That's not the annual average. That's not representative of that area. And so these kinds of issues, just having the pure data availability is not the answer. You do have to have that understanding. And I've actually been talking to Johannes Carstensen, who is also in the open session, about trying to get some oceanographic expertise to stop people misusing this data in such a way when it comes to fisheries work. I think we have a lot of work in that area, but we needed common direction.
Right.
Sorry.
I mean, no, that's great comments. I totally agree. I mean, I've seen examples of this in terms of marine biodiversity data sets. Actually, aggregations through systems like OBPS, et cetera, that pool together all these different kinds of data that are collected in. And it's, I think part of the challenge is having the adequate metadata associated with the data that properly, provide a proper context for the usage of in scientific interpretation of the data, including on survey methodology, because obviously, data from vessels of opportunity are very different from a stratified random kind of survey design. And they can't be all just merged together kind of willy-nilly. So I think, in going back to the whole issue of data standards, developing frameworks for metadata that more properly describe the nature of the observations, the sampling design, if there was one, I think is critical to more automated use of these data sets and informed use of these data sets.
Don't know to what degree you know Cisco, but and I don't know what it's like in the US. Stan Kodvicki and I had kind of discussed what we do. Actually provide survey manuals for each survey that is on the ICES databases.
Right.
We do have manuals that describe what is done. They are not really best practice documents in the sense they don't really very well explain why we do it, other than the sort of overarching aims. You know, what's the statistical basis for that design and those kinds of things. But those things do exist. It is just the fact that it's easy to just grab and run the data. I don't know whether, you know,
Exactly.
more metadata will actually help. It almost needs to be, you can't use it, you need to unlock the key, and you need to get the key by answering a quiz on the survey that you want to access.
I see.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, Sven, because it's so. Although we're making vast attempts to move all our data into a public portal, we're being very selective with what we provide. Not that that data won't ultimately be available. Anyone can come to us with the data, but that forces them to physically contact us, and they ultimately end up communicating with the survey operators themselves. And there's a lot of in-depth discussions that have before that data is disseminated. Never denied, but you know, those discussions do happen. So it makes things more complicated on probably everyone's end, but I wonder sometimes if maybe that isn't a best case scenario.
Yeah, I agree. People don't read anymore. so yeah.
And even if they do read the metadata, like Sven's saying, there's only so much you can put in a metadata, you know, and it's just words. But you know, having a discussion with someone who's out there actually collecting the data makes a world of difference.
Sure.
And our data sets are getting pretty large, as you know, particularly the acoustic data sets. You know,
Right.
And you know, it's terabytes and terabytes and terabytes of data per survey at times, and it's out there, it's discoverable, it's downloadable, but it's like you said, Sven, it goes all the way from whether people are using it right to whether they can have access to it. Fortunately, I've seen some things where data has been used to, the data that we've had for acoustic, you know, fisheries surveys have been used to detect where gas hydrates are bubbling out of the bottom of the ocean, you know, and actually our acoustics can capture that. So this is one of these things where the data can be used more broadly. And I had no idea. And all of a sudden, you know, I got this paper from the Bureau of Ocean and Energy Management who said, hey, we use your fisheries data to detect where there might be some gas hydrates. So it's difficult, but some people have had used to it. And going back to what Peter was saying, it's important to be able to have all this data out there, because all of a sudden it can be used by geologists when we were looking at something that we thought was only a fisheries application. So it's important to get it out, because there's elements in there of the data that could help others that we didn't even think of. But anyway,
Yeah, no, I agree with those sentiments. I think there is a currently unwritten responsibility upon those. We always put these disclaimers in. If you download data from Datras, it says, you know, you're doing this in your own responsibility. We're not guaranteeing anything, kind of thing, which is all very nice, but it doesn't really help that much with the actual issue of then having to go back and explain why these things are wrong. I mean, we've got some people who are using the fisheries acoustic data now. They seem to be able to detect thermoclines just from the acoustic data, which, you know, is quite helpful when you have a large-scale shelf-covering transects image. you can make a lot more of the satellite data, because now you know what your productivity depth is to what your mixing layer is, and so what you have as a surface area all of a sudden becomes a volume and a concentration and an absolute value, as opposed to a relative one based upon the surface area. So you don't want to miss those opportunities, I agree. But at the moment, the way I understand it is the amount of work that starts to explain to why that isn't true, or why this particular issue isn't the case, or whatever, because somebody has used the data wrong, precludes the benefits. I could be doing research to find out new things that may be more useful, instead of spending my time saying, no, you can't do this and here is why, while somebody else is doing the discovery. I think the motivational aspect there is a little less than ideal.
Indeed. Agreed. Well, like I said, all of a sudden we got together and we started talking science and best practices. There are some things that I wanted to ask, and particularly perhaps triggered by some of the comments here. In the opening session, I think it was Ben or Jay, I don't know, talked about the repository as being something that, the data repository, the document repository, as being one of the perhaps measurable outcomes of the best practices discussion. As Peter said, many of us are new to this. Yeah, you know, as we have our discussion in our sessions, is one of the things that we will be looking for documents, something, you know, Sven, you mentioned, you know, each one of our cruise plans has what methods we use. I'm not sure if those are examples of best practices, you know, because we can say what we do in every survey, what nets we use, what you know, our survey tracks. I mean, all of that is part of the best practices. Is this something that we should encourage, solicit in terms of per session? You know, some point, you know, some documents that we can contribute to this repository, and I'll be quiet there, but I know perhaps Christian and others have a better idea of how these repositories are constructed.
Hi, sorry, I was taking notes. But as I have mentioned before to some of you, right now we have up to 1,100 documents into the repository. So in the beginning, during the first 2-3 years, we were very interested in having a critical mass of documentation in order to make the repository useful. So when we reached that critical mass and we gathered that pool of knowledge or wisdom, then the following question arrived. All right, from all these best practices, what are really best practices? What are the methodologies that really make the difference, that really have been adopted, that really can be endorsed by communities or organizations? And this is one of the things that we are dealing right now in the process of endorsing the best practices or upgrading those documents that really have the quality or have been adopted widely. But also we are now in terms of asking ourselves, and there are sessions dedicated in this workshop for this, about the convergence, on whether there might be some methodologies in the repository already or in the system that need or that might converge to a single one, or that might somehow converge in order to be broadly harmonized and adopted. So when it comes to fisheries, I am very happy to say that we are the pioneers into the ocean best practices system in introducing this topic in the system. So there is currently a lack of reaching, I would say, at least, or in my opinion, a critical mass for documentation related to best practices in fisheries. We already have some. Most of them are related to FAO documents, but we do know that there are a wider range of documents out there that might be suitable to be included. Cisco provided in the beginning with a first list of around 20 documents or 15 documents that can be suitable to be included there. And probably, well, for sure, among others, this would be a good outcome by the end of the workshop to at least have a list of potential documents that can be included into the repository. For sure, that would be a very first and easy step, very cost effective during this workshop.
Yeah, but and I should say that as quickly as I submitted those documents, I said, wait, I'm not sure what endorsement means. And so this went into the other conversation of I think other, like Sven said, and others, we are parts of organizations that are advisory. When we endorse something, it means something. It's not just, hey, this is good science. It could be viewed as more than a greater endorsement. I just thought I'd bring this up because during the presentation, it did come up. I mean, it was that repository was pointed to, and I don't know if as we have these conversations, whether they're, what could constitute a criterion for documents that make it in there, that they have to be peer reviewed, that they have to, and some documents are not necessarily externally peer reviewed. They're internal documents that, like we were saying, cruise plans and survey plans and such are not necessarily peer reviewed. We use them. But maybe this is something that's going to come up and we might have to deal with. How do we as a group, how does this working group, help guide whatever winds up in the repositories as a resource? And maybe we can't call them a best practice. Maybe we just call them a resource, but I don't want to get into semantics at this point. This has kept me awake at night. It keeps nobody else awake at night. I know. But it keeps me awake.
Well, he's keeping me awake. It's past 9 o'clock now.
Yeah. Maybe another sort of possible sort of contribution that probably Jay is looking for, this OBPS activity. I know that they have this Frontiers sort of journal edition related to OBPS, ocean best practices. And maybe a nice, outcome of deliberations from this working group, even in the coming days, could be a short paper on, just what the current status is, and maybe even identifying, possible gaps that would need to be addressed in future. So maybe pointing to some of those resources and just acknowledging what the state of play currently is. So, I know that Frontiers kind of edition is available for this purpose if, that's something the different working groups decide to leverage. So just a suggestion.
I think we have to be very careful as well to acknowledge, I mean, at least I think we're all US or European here in this working group. We're probably at the forefront of what you can do with fisheries data. It may not be enough, but the opportunities are certainly, much better. And we have to be careful that even if we don't have the other people here, that we don't overly focus on that, because I think that's going to mean that whatever we come up with as best practice will be dismissed one way or the other. Quite rightly, if you don't have a research vessel, best practice is not to go sampling with a research vessel. So I think we need to bear that in mind, given the somewhat imbalance that we have in this working group. Sorry.
Oh, sure. I mean, we will get more people on board. We have Marina with us here, not from America or Europe, but we will get more people on board. But I also have this question, you know, what is the status? I mean, we have internal at IMR in Norway. We have internal IMR acceptable standards for stock assessment and advice, for example. But you know, these are being used, but to be updated, and I don't want to push that on anybody else. But looking at what is the situation out there, and the information we can get through this process this week, I guess, could be a starting point for looking at, as was mentioned here, the overview of what is the state of arts. Is this probably hasn't been done before, at least not trying to do so with the global scope. It's been done in some regions. And then, I mean, if we're trying to do something for the first time, then it won't be perfect the first time, but it will be a start, and maybe encourage others to join in. I think the issues that you also touched upon earlier here in this discussion about, you know, why are we doing this, and how does it link to socioeconomic and how far do we go into these various areas? This is also an important discussion. So yeah, many open ends here at the start. And I think it's important that this is supposed to be a community consultation, which is the wording used by the system here. Let's see if we can't cover the whole world community at once, but let's just try and talk our way through what is the useful approach for best practices. Some of you talked about you know, Global Fishing Watch, and certainly the availability of data like that, freely available data, has helped in many ways, not in the survey side of things, but certainly in providing data which is important in other aspects of fisheries. So yeah.
And the idea of,
I think I should shut up. I think I've commented.
Also mentioned that the Frontiers publications is another way of doing that. So if the conversation is rich enough, and it appears that it is going to be, given the preview that we've had tonight, it might wind up as a contribution we could think about submitting to Frontiers. That's a good idea. When do we have to go back to plenary? Sorry, I just was wondering.
Yes, there is a 20-minute break, and we have to be at 10:30 in the main plenary, isn't it? Yes. Thanks, Nikos. So probably we still have 10 minutes more if you want to wrap up things for just sharing with the others in the next session what might be well, a bit the summary of what we have been discussing. I've been trying to capture things, and we have been talking about how satellite and remote sensing are helping fisheries. We've been talking about the creation of best practices for fisheries and the challenges of the data collection and usage. And finally, we've been talking about, about the contribution of fisheries best practices into the repository, and also the challenges that rise about the endorsement process and how we can engage a global community by probably leveraging on the Frontiers Ocean Best Practices research topic. That's kind of what I have been capturing until now.
Good. That's a good summary.
That's good. Yeah. So did we also say that we were going to try, now that we have a final list of emails, and I'm not sure if we have access to them, to send out a note to everybody welcoming and identifying at least who the co-leads will be, a short note, something you know, a page, no more than a page, with also some of the key links? Is that something this is not for the bigger group, but Christian, Peter, me, Nikos, and Marino, is that something that we should do, or can we do? Do we have the list of email addresses?
Definitely, we do have the list. We have up to 87 or so, 85 registered people. At least the last update from the 14th of September. So once we have that page, I would be happy if you want to build up the list, the email list, and send out all those emails if
One
which
email
can release you from work.
One email in time for a welcome for the Monday session, I guess. Yeah, yeah. If that was possible, maybe yeah, that could be helpful. Yeah.
Definitely, yes.
I think I've already received one from one of the other sessions. We were told that it was, well, you couldn't but register for 2 sessions, so the other session has already sent one out. I don't know if people have access. If anybody else has received one, I could just send that round as an example to you guys. I haven't read it, haven't had the time, but it might be something in there that helps us understand what it is that, well, helps you understand what it is you need to portray. I think some sort of agenda or step through process, you've done that very nicely in the sense that you've arranged these separate sessions for data collection, stock assessment, uncertainty, and these kinds of things. I think that's really good. I think my worry is that people will dive in and out into the session that they're interested in. That flow through the thing as a whole might somehow break down. You might be talking, well, reinventing the wheel in some sessions, or going off in a completely different direction if you don't have that consistency and that flow through it. So some idea of how you see that flow progressing from one session to the next session, you think would be really useful for people to understand. So even if they only come for one session, they know why they're there.
Yeah, it's a good idea. I was going to make a joke about how, you know, that's how we do business anyway, that people who collect data don't talk to the stock assessors, and the stock assessors don't talk to the manager. So, you know, it's exactly, but I'm not going to joke. I'm not going to say it. So there. But
I was going to say, that's not a joke, unfortunately.
No, but that's a good idea to provide some thread, and there that thread should be there. I have, now that you mentioned it, I might even have a little schematic that we could include, showing why that should be the case. Good point. Peter keeps dropping in and out. He does have internet problems. So I think we will need to report out. Well, somebody from this working group, either Peter or I, will report back to plenary. Is that correct, Christian? Is that right? Peter, you're back.
Yes.
Yeah, you did say you were having internet problems. So we see you dropping on and off every so often. And we're just confirming that either you or I will report back to the plenary. Is that a short 2-minute report out, or what is it?
Yeah,
It's a 3-minute.
Yeah. No, I did drop off. I can assure you I will be from Monday and throughout. I will be on a different location in the office rather than at home, which I am now Friday night. And
So the report out to the plenary is how many minutes? 3 minutes. Okay. Peter, do you want me? I've juggled my schedule here, so I could do that to minimize any internet challenges that you have right now. So when we join back to plenary and they call on the fisheries working group, I'm happy to do so. We just lost him again. Okay. Well, I'll do it.
I think it sorted itself out. It's pretty clear he won't be able to do it.
Exactly. All right. Well, I think we're, any other, this was very helpful, and actually it more than helpful. I just found it just so nice that we were immediately launched into discussions of the themes that we want to discuss. So I'm looking forward to next week, however many sessions people can make. Realize that everybody's juggling multiple schedules. Peter, you're back, and before you disappear again, because of your intermittency in the connection, I will. Did he go away again? I will do the report out of the working group if that's okay.
Yeah. I'm still there now, I believe.
Okay. So Peter, I'll do the report out of the working group if that's okay with you. Just because of the internet back and forth.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
Thank you.
But you have you said okay, and so we'll be back in 20 minutes at plenary. Is that correct? Whoever can make it. I realize it's quite late in some parts of the world. Yeah.
I would never miss that.
Christian, just very briefly about Monday's session. Is it kind of like the one that we just had where there's some panel members that give a discussion, or is it just, you know, an introduction and then kind of like this?
Probably Peter or Cisco wants to.
Yeah, I'll jump in. The answer is yes. We'll start off with, again, a lot of people may not have made it. I think it's probably good to have a couple of opening slides on, or not necessarily slides, but remarks about what OPBS is about and where we're going as a reminder. And then also maybe quickly, I mean, if we send out the email over the weekend about the 3 sessions and the thread, then we can minimize that conversation because time is tight. It's only an hour and a half, and we'll just say this is Monday. We'll start off with the data collection, and then I think invite comments of the kind that just emerged as they did today. You know, I think that there's some structured response or feedback that OBPS wants, which is, you know, advice to the community, advice to OBPS, advice to UN Decade. You know, I think that it'll be up to the moderators to see which way the conversation goes and try to weave from those comments that should be, I think we want to you know, have a free-flowing discussion, but somewhat structured in response to what Jay and others are trying to achieve. So I haven't answered your question, Sven, other than vaguely, but you know, since we don't know who's going to be there on Monday and we may not all know each other, there has to be some room for ad-libbing, if you will, on how we structure the conversation and make sure that we steer it towards that best practice outcome at the end.
Yeah, I think trying to get together some common idea of what best practice means to the people, at least in this group. I mean, we've had a discussion and we're all a bit not quite sure what we define as common practice, and I'm totally with that in the sense that I don't have a clear idea anyway. But if we can do that, then people can start compiling documents and things get easy. If we have some sort of definition of what best practice in fisheries science should contain and what it shouldn't contain, and I've tried to sort of hit on some of those points in my presentation, I think then we can actually make a lot more progress rather than sort of discussing individual details at the beginning and then sort of seeing where does it take us. I don't know whether that's sensible. I don't know where the ocean best practice process is overall, as I say, I'm not that familiar. I mean, do we have a clear definition of what is what best practice documents should contain and shouldn't contain, those kinds of things, and which practices should be included?
Right. Is the opening
I
slide?
think I've listened in a little bit now, and I think
Sorry, I was just gonna, are the opening slides that, is it Ben, that Ben gave, are they accessible, and can we provide a link again to that welcome email to the group? Because I think, as Sven said, they provided some indication of how that community has evolved into defining best practices. Do we know if Ben has made that available, or will maybe it's already online? I don't know.
Maybe a suggestion, in terms of tackling this definition of what constitutes a best practice for, fisheries, would be maybe delineating some of this particular, subject areas that these best practices could be applied to. For example, data management, stock assessment, survey techniques, and the like. So I think it may help to kind of decompose the broader fisheries, topic into some manageable sub pieces that, reflect a range of activities that then we can perhaps try to, articulate some best practices for. Just a suggestion.
Yeah. The subtopics make sense. It makes it into bite-sized chunks, to put it that way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you have divided those subsections, and you can use them as headings.
Mm-hmm.
The important bit is that we keep the consistency. If we have a method that applies to one type of survey over here, but the stock assessment says we need this type of survey, then you're going to have issues. So it's that common thread that means we first need to define for everyone what it is we mean, and then we have that ability to go back and check those things for consistency and continuity. So I think the sessions are set up that way, and that makes a lot of sense in terms of the best practice elements. It's just, what is best practice?
Right. And there was a definition in
I think that will be easier to discuss.
Okay.
Sven, sorry, I just saw your message from the chat, and I'm adding here a link to the Ocean Best Practices repository with the results of the search looking for ISIS and fisheries. Maybe there you can find whether the documents might be or not available from your question in the chat. So Sven just asked about, he was in doubt whether the ISIS documents or best practices for quality assurance are already in the repository or not, because there is now a new working group starting next year that is trying to compile best practices documentation for ISIS.
Yeah, I think it went out to everyone. I didn't just send it to Christian. I think according to my chat, it went to everyone. So they should be able to see it too. I just had a quick look at your link, and yes, there's lots of them. I haven't been able to look through them, but we do have, for example, a whole bunch of what is called survey manuals that are actually not, they're more than the survey reports. They're externally peer-reviewed documents of survey protocols. Some include how you calculate your index from the data and so forth. I assume they're in there. I mean, If not, have a chat with Niels Olaf. He was the instigator of those. Niels Olaf Handegaard at IMR. He started them. He was my predecessor as the steering group chair. So he started the compilation of those, and we've continued with those. So they'd be very useful documents to at least state what we're doing.
And actually including this link into a document that we sent out this weekend. So I assume this is a public document or a public link. And so I think, again, it just gives an indication so people can see what it is that we mean. As an example, that could be good. Unfortunately, as soon as we leave this chat, I'm going to lose this link. So I'll have to write it down somewhere or save it somewhere.
Christian is a superb guide to that, so he will make sure we have it. That's great.
You are referring to the link that.
Yeah, the one that went to the best practices fisheries. Yeah.
All right. I can add that in the minutes as well.
Okay. All right.
Yes. Yeah, and also Bardis shared with us a link to the project that he was mentioning before about the satellite in situ fisheries data integration.
Yeah, shameless promotion, but it may be of interest to some folks. So. Sorry about that. By the way, I just wanted to say, since I'm kind of the new guy, I don't know if you have my contact information or need my contact information, like an email or something.
Can you put it in the chat on the side?
I can, yeah. I'll put it right now.
Yeah.
So, again, you know, I'm somewhat only peripherally involved in the fisheries side of things, but
Not anymore. Now you're in the thick of it.
Yeah. So, but I definitely maintain interest.
Great, it came through. All right.
Thanks.
And you should be then on the list that we received from Pauline of folks.
Yes.
Greg, obviously you're on that list. You should be on that list.
You are in that list, yeah.
I am, okay. I can't remember what exactly I registered for before, but
All right, so we got 10 minutes till we rejoin the plenary, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
All
right. Anything else? Otherwise, should we give each other? Should we take a 10-minute break or? Yeah. All right. Okay.
Sounds good. Well, nice meeting everyone. Thank you
Yes,
for having me.
I was looking for the coffee emoji. I'm sorry. Well, I can't find it. So just think of a cup of coffee and that's where I'll be. Thank you.
Okay.
That's good. All right.
Bye. Thanks, guys.
See you. Bye-bye.
Cisco. No, Cisco is gone.
Yeah, thanks for your help, Christian.
Nice to meet
Thanks,
you.
Christian. Nice to meet you. And if I'm not going to be able to join the session later. So I'll be on, this is Monday at 9 o'clock, 9 your time. I think that's 8 o'clock here. So I shall try and be online at 7:30. And then we can go through any grief if I see how far I got, came up with any issues over the weekend with the presentation.
Good.
But I'll send it to you beforehand.
I'll be there from 7:30 your time as well. So,
brilliant.
Yeah. Thank you
very much. If not before, I'll see you then.
Good. Have a nice weekend.
Bye. Yeah, you too.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye now. Cheers.